This story is very meaningful. Everyone should hear it. Listen to Brian tell the story. My name is Viktor Kovalenko. I'm 32 years old, a man shaped by a decade of shadows, 9 years in a prison cell in a country I no longer call home, and 1 year since, trying to piece together a life that feels like it belongs to someone else. I was a political activist once, young and fearless, with a fire in my chest that burned for justice. Now that fire is just a flicker, buried under scars. Some you can see, like my crooked jaw and missing teeth, and some you can't, like the weight that presses on my soul every damn day. I live with my dad, Mikhail, in a cramped apartment in Portland, Oregon. It's March 11th, 2025, and the rain outside mirrors the storm inside me. I'm not a hero, not anymore. I'm just a guy who survived. It started with a phone call I didn't expect. I was sitting at our chipped kitchen table, my hands shaking as I gripped my old phone, staring at an unfamiliar number flashing on the screen. It was from Seattle, a city 3 hours away, a place I'd traced in my mind 1,000 times since I found her online. Daria Petrova. My Daria. The woman I loved, the one I lost the day they dragged me away in handcuffs. I'd sent her a message the night before, a coward's plea. I don't want to intrude. It's Viktor. Here's my number if you ever want to talk. If not, that's okay. I'd turned off the phone right after, terrified of her silence, or worse, her rejection. But now it was ringing, and my heart was a hammer against my ribs. The sound echoed in the quiet apartment, each vibration a jolt through my nerves. I could feel the sweat beating on my forehead, my breath shallow as I hovered my thumb over the answer button. What if it wasn't her? What if it was? I pressed it, fumbling, and croaked out a weak, "Hello?" There was a pause, a heartbeat of silence that stretched into eternity. Then her voice came through, soft and trembling. "Viktor, is it really you?" It was her, Daria. The sound of her saying my name hit me like a punch, stealing the air from my lungs. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, as if I could pull her closer through the line. "Yeah," I said, my voice barely audible, cracking under the weight of 10 years. "It's me." She let out a sound, a laugh, a sob, I couldn't tell. And then she was asking, "Are you okay? Are you really okay?" Over and over, like she needed to hear it to believe it. I wanted to say yes, to reassure her, but the words stuck in my throat. I wasn't okay, not really. Instead, I whispered, "I've missed you, Daria." And it felt like a confession, raw and unguarded. She started crying then, her breaths hitching through the speaker. "I thought you were dead," she said, her voice breaking into pieces. "I heard things, rumors about prisoners disappearing, about the unrest. I thought they'd taken you forever." My chest tightened, a dull ache spreading as she spoke. She told me she'd tried to reach me, parcels of food, money for the commissary, letters she'd poured her heart into, but they'd all been sent back, stamped with cold rejections. "I was so scared," she said. "Every day I wondered if that was the day they'd killed you." I closed my eyes, picturing her alone, waiting, grieving. I'd survived, but hearing her pain made me feel like I'd failed her all over again. "I'm here now," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm here." That call lasted hours. We didn't say much at first, just sat there breathing, letting the silence fill with all the things we couldn't yet put into words. Then she started talking, about Seattle, her job as a journalist, the life she'd built. Her voice was the same, warm and alive, but there was a heaviness to it now, a shadow of the years we'd lost. I listened, hanging on every word, my fingers tracing the cracks in the table as if they could ground me. I told her about Portland, about living with Dad, about the shitty job I had at a warehouse unloading boxes. It wasn't much, but it was mine. "I found you online," I admitted, a little sheepish. "Your articles. I couldn't believe it was you." She laughed, a real laugh this time, and said, "I hoped you'd find me someday." We hung up with a promise to talk again, and I sat there staring at the phone, my heart racing with something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. But it was fragile, threaded with fear. I wasn't the man she'd loved anymore. Prison had carved me into something else, someone harder, quieter, broken in ways I couldn't fix. My jaw ached as I clenched it, a reminder of the beatings, the years of eating slop that rotted my teeth. What if she saw me and couldn't stand it? The next few days were a blur of texts and calls. She'd send me pictures, her morning coffee with a swirl of cream, a rainy Seattle street glistening under streetlights, a dog-eared book she was reading with her notes scribbled in the margins, and I'd send back clumsy replies, photos of the gray Portland sky hanging heavy over the rooftops, or the dented kettle Dad used every morning, its whistle a comforting constant in our quiet life. It felt like we were reaching across a chasm, testing the bridge between us, each message a tentative step to see if it would hold. My phone became a lifeline, buzzing on the table as I sat there, staring at it, a stupid grin creeping onto my face every time her name lit up the screen. I'd type out responses, delete them, type again, trying to sound normal, trying not to let her see how much I was hanging on her every word. "Nice coffee," I'd write, then cringe at how lame it sounded. But she'd reply with a little heart emoji, and my chest would loosen, just a bit. But then there was Lena. Daria mentioned her early on, her best friend, a photographer who'd been with her through the worst of it, the years when I was gone and Daria was alone, piecing herself back together. "Lena's the one who kept me sane," Daria told me once, her voice soft with gratitude. I pictured someone warm, supportive, maybe a little quirky, someone who'd welcome me with open arms because I was part of Daria's past she'd fought to hold on to. I was wrong. I didn't meet Lena until a week later, when Daria called me from a cafe and forgot to mute the line. I was sprawled on the couch, the phone pressed to my ear, listening to Daria ramble about a story she was working on, when another voice cut through, sharp, edged with suspicion. "So this is the guy?" I heard Lena say, loud enough that it startled me upright. "He better not be some weirdo, Daria. I've got a bat and I'm not afraid to use it." I froze, my stomach twisting into a knot. My laugh came out forced, a nervous huff, as Daria swatted at her and said, "Lena, stop, he's fine." But I could feel Lena's doubt like a spotlight burning through the phone, pinning me in place. "I'm not a weirdo," I said, trying to keep my tone light, but it sounded weak even to me. Daria giggled. "See? He's harmless." But Lena didn't laugh. She hummed, skeptical, and I could almost see her narrowing her eyes, sizing me up through the distance. She didn't trust me, and part of me didn't blame her. I was a stranger to her, a ghost from Daria's past, dragging baggage she couldn't see but could probably sense. I wanted her to like me, but I wasn't sure I deserved it. That same week, I met Jake at work. He was a loader at the warehouse, a wiry guy with a buzz cut and a grin that never quit, always bouncing around like he'd had too much coffee. He was younger than me, maybe 25, and he didn't pry into my life, which I liked. We'd unload boxes together, him chattering about his girlfriend Tina, or the dive bar he'd hit up the night before, while I nodded along, keeping my head down. One afternoon, he caught me staring at my phone, smiling like an idiot at a picture Daria had sent, a selfie of her in a knit scarf, the wind tousling her hair. "Who's got you all gooey, man?" he teased, elbowing me as he leaned over to peek. I yanked the phone back, my face burning. "Just someone," I muttered, shoving it in my pocket. He smirked, undeterred. "Someone, huh? She hot?" I rolled my eyes, but a small smile slipped out. "She's more than that." He clapped me on the back, hard enough to make me wince. "Good for you, Victor. Don't mess it up. She sounds like a keeper." Jake became a fixture after that, always asking about the mystery girl, turning it into a running joke. I didn't mind. He was loud, sure, but he was solid, a guy who'd have your back without asking too many questions. I didn't tell him much, just bits and pieces, but he didn't push. "You're a quiet one," he said once, tossing me a water bottle during a break. "But I bet there's a hell of a story in there." I shrugged, taking a sip. "Maybe," he grinned. "Keep your secrets, man. Just don't screw over the girl." Then there was Sophia. She lived across the hall from us, a tiny woman in her 50s with a cloud of curly hair and a habit of knocking on our door with leftovers. Stews, breads, things she'd cooked too much of. "You boys are too skinny," she'd say, shoving a Tupperware into my hands, her accent a mix of something Eastern European I couldn't place. Dad liked her. She reminded him of home, he said, and I didn't mind her fussing. She'd linger sometimes, asking about my day, her dark eyes sharp like she could see through me. One night, she caught me pacing the hall, my phone clutched tight after a call with Daria, my head spinning with how fast things were moving. "Trouble?" she asked, leaning against her doorframe, arms crossed. I shook my head, too quick. "No, just thinking." She raised an eyebrow. "About a woman, I bet. You've got that look." I didn't answer, but she smiled, small and knowing. "Be careful, Victor. Love's a tricky thing." Everything was building, Daria, the calls, the fragile hope, until it cracked. I was home alone, Dad out with Sophia picking up groceries, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You think you're safe, Kovalenko? We see you." My breath caught, sharp and cold, like I'd been dunked in ice. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering onto the table, and I stared at it, my pulse pounding in my ears. I knew that tone, the menace, the weight of it. It was them, or someone tied to them, the regime, the guards, the shadows that had haunted me for 9 years. My hands shook as I picked it up again, rereading the words, each one a needle under my skin. I stumbled to the window, peering through the blinds, the rain-slicked street blurring into shapes that could have been anything. Anyone. Was someone out there? Watching? I didn't tell Daria. I couldn't. She was already talking about coming to Portland, her voice bright with plans. A church with stained glass windows she'd read about, a place we'd dreamed of seeing back when dreams didn't cost us everything. "It's by an artist I love," she'd said, excitement bubbling through the phone. "We could go together, make it ours." I'd agreed, forcing a smile she couldn't see, but that text sat in my gut like a stone. What if they knew about her? What if they came for us both? The threats didn't stop. 2 days later, another message. "Run all you want. We'll find you." Then a photo, grainy, dark, but unmistakable. It was me, walking from the warehouse, my head down against the rain. My knees buckled, and I sank onto the couch, my breath ragged. They were here, in Portland, close. I thought about telling Dad, but he'd worry. Maybe push me to leave, and I couldn't uproot him again. I thought about Jake, but what could he do? Sophia's words echoed, "Be careful," and I wondered if she'd seen something I hadn't. Daria came anyway. I couldn't stop her, didn't want to, even with the fear clawing at me. I met her at the train station, my hands stuffed in my pockets to hide the trembling. She stepped off the platform, and my heart stopped. She was real here, her dark hair catching the light, her eyes scanning the crowd until they locked on mine. She ran to me and I caught her, her arms wrapping around me like she'd never let go. "Victor," she breathed, her face pressed to my chest, and I held her tight, her warmth chasing the cold away. "You're here," I said, my voice rough, and she nodded, tears wetting my shirt. I didn't care about my crooked jaw, my hollow face, not then. She saw me, and she stayed. We went to that cafe, the one downtown with the scratched tables and the hum of conversation. She was telling me about her latest article, her hands waving, her laugh lighting up the room, when the door swung open and he walked in, Roman Volkov. I knew him instantly, those cold gray eyes, that scar slicing his cheek. He'd been one of us, a friend, until he turned, selling us out for a paycheck. Now he was their enforcer, a ghost from the past made flesh. He slid into our booth, his bulk crowding the space, his smirk a knife. "Victor," he said, slow and deliberate. "Daria, didn't expect this little reunion." Her hand found mine under the table, her grip tight, her breath hitching. "What do you want, Roman?" she asked, her voice steel despite the fear I could feel in her fingers. "You," he said, leaning in, his breath sour with tobacco. "Both of you. My employers don't like loose ends. Walk away, Daria, or he's gone, for good this time." My blood roared, rage and terror crashing together, but I couldn't move, couldn't speak. "Leave her out of it," I managed, my voice a growl. He laughed, standing, towering over us. 1 week. Decide. Then he was gone, the door slamming shut behind him. Daria didn't flinch. "We're not running," she said, turning to me, her eyes fierce. "Not again." I wanted to argue, to protect her, but she was already dialing Lena. "Get here," she said. "We need you." Lena arrived fast, her camera banging against her hip, her glare fixed on me. "Who's the bastard?" she snapped. I told them, Roman, the betrayal, the threat, my voice shaking. Jake showed up too, uninvited but there, his grin gone when he saw us. "What's the deal?" he asked. Daria explained, and he whistled low. "Shit, man, I'm in. Let's take this guy down." We fought back. Daria wrote the article, raw, unflinching, naming Roman, the regime, the threats. Lena got photos, Roman outside my building, proof he was real. Jake called his cousin, Officer Daniels, a cop with a buzz cut like his and a no-nonsense stare, who got the feds involved. Sophia even pitched in, slipping me a name, an old friend who knows people, that led to more evidence. The story broke, and Roman vanished, Chased off by the light we'd turned on him. But I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. We fought back. Daria wrote the article. Raw, unflinching, naming Roman, the regime, the threats. Her words were a blade, cutting through years of silence, laying bare the truth we'd both carried like a secret wound. She typed it out in a fury, her fingers flying over the keys as we sat in my cramped living room, the rain drumming against the windows. I watched her, my heart pounding with a mix of pride and fear. She was fearless in a way I'd forgotten how to be. Lena got photos, Roman outside my building, his hulking figure caught in the grainy glow of a streetlight, proof he was real and here stalking us. She'd staked out the place for hours, her camera clutched tight, her jaw set with determination. I hadn't expected from someone who'd threatened me with a bat just weeks before. Jake called his cousin, Officer Daniels, a cop with a buzz cut like his and a no-nonsense stare that made me feel like he could see every crack in my story. Daniels didn't ask questions. He just nodded, made a call, and got the feds involved, his voice clipped and efficient over the phone. Sophia even pitched in, slipping me a name, an old friend who knows people, scribbled on a scrap of paper with a look that said she'd seen worse than this. That name led to a guy in Seattle, some expat with connections, who dug up records tying Roman to the regime's payroll. The story broke online, a wildfire of clicks and shares, and Roman vanished, chased off by the light we'd turned on him. But I knew it wasn't over, not yet. The apartment felt too small after that, the walls pressing in as I paced, my mind racing. Daria stayed the night, curled up on the couch with a blanket Dad had dug out of a box, her presence a quiet anchor in the chaos. I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the building, every shadow outside the window had me on edge. I kept my phone close, half expecting another text, another photo, but it stayed silent. Too silent. "He's gone," Daria said the next morning, her voice firm as she sipped coffee from a chipped mug. "We scared him off." I wanted to believe her, but the knot in my gut wouldn't loosen. "He'll be back," I muttered, staring at the floor. "Guys like him don't just quit." She reached for my hand, her fingers warm against mine. "Then we'll be ready." Lena showed up that afternoon, her camera bag slung over her shoulder, her eyes still wary but softer now. "You're not as useless as I thought," she said, tossing me a smirk as she dropped onto the couch. I managed a weak grin. "Thanks, I guess." She pulled out her laptop, showing us the photos. Roman's face, sharp and unmistakable, time-stamped and geotagged. "This is gold," she said. "Feds are eating it up." Jake rolled in an hour later, Tina in tow, a short, freckled girl with a loud laugh who hugged Daria like they'd known each other forever. "Daniels says they've got eyes on the borders," Jake told us, cracking open a beer he'd brought. "If that bastard tries to sneak back in, they'll nab him." Tina nodded, plopping down next to him. "My man's got connections," she said, grinning. "You're safe now, Victor." But I didn't feel safe. I couldn't shake the feeling that Roman was out there, waiting, biding his time. Sophia knocked on the door that evening, her arms full of a steaming pot of borscht. "You need strength," she said, setting it on the table with a thud. "Trouble like this, it doesn't end easy." Her words stuck with me, heavy and true, and I caught her eye as she left, a silent understanding passing between us. She'd lived through her own wars, she knew. Daria stayed the weekend, and we tried to make it normal. We cooked together, her chopping vegetables with a precision that made me laugh, me fumbling with the stove until she took over, teasing me about my prison cooking skills. We watched old movies on Dad's ancient TV, her head resting on my shoulder, her warmth seeping into me. It was almost enough to forget. Almost. But every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped, and I'd see her watching me, her brow furrowing with worry. She didn't voice. Saturday came and she insisted on the church. "We need this," she said, pulling me out the door, her hand firm in mine. The rain had stopped, leaving the air crisp and clean, and we walked through Portland's quiet streets, the city waking up around us. The church was small, tucked between taller buildings, its stained glass windows glowing even in the daylight, reds and blues and golds spilling across the stone. We stepped inside and the silence wrapped around us, heavy and sacred. The windows were everything she'd said, intricate, alive, the colors dancing on the floor as the sun shifted. "We dreamed of this," she whispered, her voice echoing softly. "Places like this, together." I nodded, my throat tight, and squeezed her hand. "Yeah, we did." We stood there side by side, the light painting us in hues I hadn't seen in years. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the woman she'd become, stronger than I'd ever known, her eyes bright with a fire that hadn't died. "I thought I'd lost you," I said, my voice breaking, raw with everything I'd held back. She turned to me, tears glinting on her lashes, and smiled, a small, trembling thing that broke me open. "You didn't," she said, stepping closer, her hands finding my face. "You never did." I pulled her in, my arms wrapping around her, and she pressed her forehead to mine, her breath warm against my skin. The weight I'd carried, the guilt, the fear, didn't vanish, but it shifted, lighter somehow, shared between us. We stayed like that, the world fading until it was just us and the colors, the past and the present blurring into something new. I wasn't whole, not yet, but standing there with her, I felt like I could be. Roman was gone for now, and the threats had quieted, but I knew they could come back. We'd face them if they did, together, with Lena's sharp edges, Jake's loud loyalty, Sophia's quiet wisdom, and even Tina's infectious cheer. They'd become my people, this ragged little crew, and I'd fight for them as hard as I'd fought for myself. We left the church hand in hand, the sun breaking through the clouds, casting long shadows behind us. "What now?" I asked, my voice steady for the first time in days. She grinned, that old mischief sparking in her eyes. "Now we live," she said. "Really live." I laughed, a real laugh, rough and unpracticed, and pulled her close as we walked back into the city, the future uncertain but ours. Looking back, I learned something through all this, something hard-won and true. Resilience isn't just surviving, it's choosing to keep going, to reach out even when the past tries to drag you down. It's in the people who stand with you, the ones who see your scars and stay anyway. Daria taught me that. Lena, Jake, Sophia, they all did. We don't get to erase what's been done to us, but we can build something new, piece by jagged piece. I was a prisoner once, in more ways than one, but I'm free now, not because the chains are gone, but because I've got something worth fighting for. So here's my ask to you. Yeah, you reading this. What's your story? What's the thing you've carried, the weight you're scared to let go? Drop it in the comments, share it with us. Maybe you've got a Daria, a Lena, a Jake in your life, someone who's pulled you through. Tell us about them. Or maybe you're still in the dark, waiting for the light. That's okay too. We've been there. Let's talk about it. Because if I've learned anything, it's that none of us get through this alone.